When you get to Google Forms, on the initial landing page, you will see two types of forms you can start with. You can start with a blank form. This will not have the answer key choices. This would be for polls or if you want to get information from parents, things like that. Now, if you want to self-grade, you would choose a blank quiz. However, either one you choose, you can always turn on and off the quiz feature in the settings. Those are located up here along the top. When you click on the settings, you have your general settings, presentation, and then quizzes. And you can always turn on and off quizzes. Let's go through the other settings. Under general, you can have the form collect email addresses. If you do this, then the respondent can get a receipt and you can decide if they request it or always. You can also require that they sign into an ECSD account or turn that off if you're sending the form to the parents. You can also limit them to one response or give them unlimited responses. You can also allow them to edit after they submit. If you have limit to one response and edit after they submit, if a student submits their work, they can go back and complete. So if you have an extra long form, as long as the questions aren't set to required, they can go to the submit button, complete part of the work, submit it, and then open it back up at a future time. However, there's some limitations with that. If you have this question set to required, they will not be able to submit it until they put an answer on everything. Also, do you want your respondents to see the summary and text responses? This one I usually do not mark because do you want the students to see what other students put? This would only be if you're doing like a group poll. On the next settings is your presentation. Show progress bar. This is if you have a lot of sections in your form. You want to show the person how far they are before they're going to get to the end. And also, do you want to shuffle the question order? All questions are going to be shuffled together, even those with their first and last name. So if you don't want those shuffled together, use the sections that I'll show in a later video. And do you want to show them a link to submit another response? You'll have this if you aren't on limit to one response, then you can show them a link to get to submit again. And you can put in a confirmation message. A lot of times in the confirmation message, I would link to the next activity so the students, as soon as they're done with their form, have a link either back to a Google Classroom activity or to something else that they need to do. For quizzes, when you make it a quiz, you can turn on locked mode. Locked mode will make the quiz full size and they will not be able to open any other tabs or go to any other windows as they take it. They have to be on an ECSD Chromebook though. The next choice you have is when to release the grade. You can release the grade immediately after their submission, but I'm always careful about this one. Do I want the students to immediately know their grade and pass that information on? Or if they want to take it again, they might know the answers. Also, if you have questions in there that need to be manually graded, the students are going to be marked wrong on those and think they got a lower grade than they might have gotten. Therefore, I usually do it later after manual review, unless it's a quick formative check and I want them to know how they're doing. Respondents can see, what do you want them to see when they get their grade released? Do you want them to see what questions they missed, what the correct answers were, and what the point values of the questions? So if each question wasn't worth the same amount of points, you might want to let them know what the point values were. The other two depends on how the assessment is and what it is used for. When you are finished, click Save. The next section, let's finish along these choices up here. We have a preview button. Whenever I do a Google form, I preview it continuously as I make it to make sure it is working correctly. And I always take it one final time before I submit it to the students to make sure I marked all the correct answers and everything works just how I want. You can also give it a theme. You can choose an image for a header, which they have some basic ones, or you can upload your own. You can also choose what kind of color you want your theme to be and the background color. They do have some basic font styles. If you want even more formatting, you can use pictures and images embedded into the questions, and there's a video in this Friday Focus on that. There's also add-ons for Google Forms, but those usually have a price associated with them. When you click the send button, you can email a form to someone. You can get the link to the form, or you can embed the form. If you're using Canvas, the embed one works really well when you go into the HTML code. So this is a great option for Canvas users. If you're using Google Classroom, do not use these options. Make sure you go to your Google Drive and find the form that way. Then you have great importing options. On the three dots, you can undo something you've done, make a copy of the form, move it to trash, get a pre-filled link where some of the answers are already pre-filled in for whoever's taking the form, print it. Add collaborators. When you add collaborators, these are people that can edit the form completely. This is not what you want to send if you want someone to take the form. There's the script editor, add-ons, and your preferences. Let's talk about this one. When you click on preferences, do you want every new form you create to automatically collect email addresses as the default? Do you want your questions to be required as the default? If you make all your questions required, you might spend a lot of time turning on the required toggle. So you might want to just start with that. If you don't always make your questions required, then uncheck that. You can also set a default quiz point value. How many points do you want this quiz to be? Yeah, each question in the quiz to be. I always just do 1 point per question. You might want to increase that. Next, when you're ready to make your form, we have our options. You can add questions, select what type of question you want to use. You can import questions from other forms. So if I click on this, it will take me to other forms I've made in the past. And I can select a question off that form. So if I like these questions, I can select those and import them. You can also just add a text box. Now, a text box is a really nice break in a form if you need to give directions. Let's look at what this form looks like with a text box. So if we go to here, it kind of is a little bit darker, like a bold color, than the rest of the sections, the rest of the questions. The next, you can just insert an image, insert a video, or add a section. And we have a whole video on adding sections in this Friday Focus. Next, let's talk about the question itself. We have short answer. Those can be graded with an answer key. So this would just be a short 1 or 2 word answer. With an answer key, you would type what correct answers. You do have to think of all the variety of ways students might answer. They might capitalize the first letter, they might not. Do you want that to be marked correct or not? If you're using numbers, they might spell it out. That's when you want to use response validation, that if you are using numbers for the short answers, that you make it that it has to be a number. And we have a video on response validation. The next is a paragraph. So that'd be a long answer. Then we have multiple choice. So this, they can only choose one correct answer, and you have an answer key for that one. The checkbox, they can choose multiple correct answers and an answer key. You have a drop down, which this is if you have a really long list of choices. I usually do this if I'm listing like all the teachers in the school, so it doesn't fill up all the space on the form. So it just is a drop down menu. There is an answer key. You can also have them file upload. So this would be if you want the students to go to their Google Drive and submit something that they have produced. It might be a Google Doc, a picture, a slideshow, but they can actually submit that and you will get the link to that piece of work. When you do this, you can only allow specific types. So if you want it to just be a Google Doc that they upload, there are specific types, how many things they can upload, and what the file size can be. So the next one is a linear scale for rating. Then you have a multiple choice grid. For a multiple choice grid, they can only have one correct answer on each row. The checkbox grid, they can check multiple things. When you make these, let's just add real quick some choices because I want you to show you what these look like. This is great if you like to do matching. So if you had matching before on paper, this one is what I'd use, either the multiple choice grid or the checkbox. If you go into view, so let's view it real quick, this is what it looks like, and they would mark their answers like that. They can mark, but they can't put more than one in each row, okay? Now, to mark the correct answer key, you go here, you go, okay, this is the correct answers. And you can assign points per. Now, if you're doing the checkbox grid, this is what it looks like. But they can check multiple ones on each row. And then you have your answer key. So you can check multiple ones are correct and assign multiple points. The last two question types are your date and time. I don't do these very often because it just wastes time when the form is going to give you a timestamp when they submit it. You can add images, and we have a complete video on images. And the next thing, you can duplicate a question. So if you're doing a lot of similar ones, you can duplicate, delete, and you can make the question required here if you don't have that set your preferences. The three dots, you can show the description. You can have it go to a section based on an answer, and that's in the section video. And you can shuffle the order of those options, so it mixes them up. So if you don't want to shuffle all your questions, sometimes I would just shuffle the option order of things so each kid's quiz doesn't look identical. And those are the basics of a Google form. On the responses tab, we'll get into responses in another video.